I've been painting since I was about 13. I ended up being represented by Loretta Goodwin in Birmingham and Waltz Fine Art Gallery in Wilmington, North Carolina, and a couple others. So, but I was still working. Actually, just exactly what happened is in June of 90, somewhere along back in there, 98, I was with a company called RSG, Vice President of Sales, and we did business worldwide, but that was it got real slow. This was in June, and the owner, who's a great guy, Chris Martin, said, he and I were talking, I said, why don't I just take off? I said, you know, I've been doing pretty good in art. I said, why don't I just take off till the end of the year and see what, you know, if it helps or whatever. Well, that first year that I painted, I made as much as I did working. It's almost impossible, I thought, but it's not. I think the first thing you have to realize it's a business. It's not, you know, it's not some gift and people are come rush to buy your paintings, and that's not true. When you finish that piece of art, it's a widget and it's got to be packaged and shipped and framed and, you know, priced right, everything. I really got lucky because about that time they had the first Atlanta Fine Art Show, the inaugural. So my brothers were painting then, and we were accepted into that show, and it was a far more abstract type show than what we did, but we metilated it, said you guys need to do Art Expo New York because they're far more representational than this contemporary stuff. So I, you know, just got together our slides, this was a long time ago, and sent them to New York, and we were juried in. So, I mean, they had like 1,200 booths at Jacob Javits Center. This is a big, big art show. And one day, David Ledman and his wife came by, Nancy, and one morning and looked at our art and said, we like your art, but we hadn't seen the show. We talked a little while, and they said, we're going to see the rest of the show. And they walked around, and then it was probably about 1 o'clock, they came back by and said, we like your guys, all your work. We like all of your work. We'd like to represent you. And I said, great. And he said, he picked 9 paintings that we had in the booth. And he said, if you'll take those down, Nancy and I'll be back after lunch and pick them up. So we took them down. And this was back, you know, when you wore suits and shiny shoes and ties and everything. About 4 o'clock, I thought, I told my brother Steve, I said, we'll never see those people again. We've taken those paintings down. But David and Nancy came back, and he said, did you get that total? And I said, yes. And he said, Nancy, write him a check, which she did. And then he said, you know, we're not buying paintings. He said, we're buying a relationship. He said, we don't have any artist in our gallery. We don't feel like we move forward and help them and us. So we shook hands, and that's been it. He's represented me ever since. We've never had a contract, anything. We've been friends ever since. I get up about twice a year just to visit. That's where I got my first real boost, not only for the art that he sold, but just the confidence he showed in all of us. He actually made me believe I must be pretty good. So before that, my wife Carol entered me in this a local art show that we have here in Chicago. I was in a meeting in Chicago when she entered me, and I came back and I fussed about it. I ended up selling 4 paintings, and the judge asked me to be represented in the gallery in Birmingham, the New Life Art Gallery. So that was the first gallery I was represented in, and that you know, it was little things that more or less people did for me almost more than what I did for myself. That I got lucky, I guess. Well, whatever. But I sure do appreciate all those people. All three of my brothers, we have 4 boys.
Wow.
Me, Steve, David, and Bill. I probably painted first since I was 6 years older than the next one. But Steve was the first one to paint really nice stuff, you know. And then we all kind of got into it, and then so we would go out and stick a 16 by 20 on the easel and paint. And you know, we had a ball. We had with 4 brothers, we had a lot of free-flowing criticism of paintings and honest stuff. But it was, I think it helped us all. No, uncles on my mother's side painted some when they were young. I didn't know this till much later, that my grandfather, my father's father, might have painted a little when he was younger. My mother loved to draw. I guess all of our boys, our first inspiration was a set of Funk and Wagnall encyclopedias. And, they had about 13 pages on the Impressionists. So the first people we knew were Monet and Pissarro, and you know. And we used to, I can remember laying in the floor, flipping pages, me and Steve and Dave, and we were just kind of fascinated by it. I don't know if it was the color, the design, the thought of painting, being outside, creating. I don't know what it was, but it stuck, whatever it was. I started painting in oil, and couldn't figure out how to keep those slippery things on the panel, you know, and I try to abstract. I just, you read stuff and you're influenced by it. You know, after I became a little more proficient, I did watercolor. I worked for RCA Service Company at NASA in Huntsville. We had visual arts and schedule and review procedure books on milestones for the Saturn V when it was being developed. Then I left and went back to Auburn, got a degree in business and marketing, but I never had any training other than a workshop with an artist, Ted Gershner, and of course me and my brother's painting. And we were critical, if something was wrong, it was pointed out pretty quick, I still feel that, every artist, I don't care where you went to school, is self-trained, self-taught. You have to be, because I teach classes, but the first thing I tell people is I can't teach you how to paint. I show you how I paint, and I can show you some techniques and some lessons, but you have to get it yourself eventually. The way to do it, the way I would do it if I had to start over again, would go to workshops with the various artists I really like, because you get real information there. I started off in Auburn in advertising design. My first job out of high school was with Hayes Aircraft in Birmingham as a draftsman. We were working on, I remember it distinctly, Launch Complex number 36 down at Cape Canaveral. And we did the drawings of isometric stuff of pipes and piping and various parts of the equipment. I went to Auburn. I started back, I was 28. married, Carol and I were married, we had our son David, and I went back to Auburn and finished in 70. We started back in 68. And the reason I left, of course, I knew I wanted to go back to school, but NASA had a layoff. I didn't get laid off, but I got to thinking, you know, if I do get caught in this layoff, where else is a visual arts guy going to go to work? So we saved something like $500-600 and went back to Auburn. And I worked and she worked, and we got through.
Known him since high school. $18,
Yeah.
it's probably.
We knew each other
17,
way before
yeah,
that. We were
yeah.
friends.
We were 20 when we got married.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Happened in the church.
Yep.
We just,
Quit our jobs and took off to California.
yeah.
But we were not hippies.
She said, she's always told people we were pre-hippies.
Oh,
But we weren't. Yeah, we were nothing like hippies.
we had friends out there,
Yeah.
so that's why we went. And then we stayed for 9 months,
Yeah,
and I got homesick, and
expecting. She wanted mother.
I wanted to see my mother. So anyway, we came home, and then we moved to Huntsville, and our son was born in Huntsville. Yeah,
Great times.
yeah.
I'm so pleased now that we came home from California.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
I am too.
At that age, we both turned 21 in California, and you could buy a case of beer for $7, which was cheaper than it was in Alabama. I guess because of no tax. I don't remember.
I don't know.
And rent was very reasonable. Yeah, we're both
Both
from
from
Silicotta.
Silicaga. He went to one high school, I went to the other one. I
Yeah,
went to
yeah.
Silicaga High School, he went to the county school.
Comer. I went to Comer.
B.B. Comer.
But I mean, back then we were just 10
were
or
just
12 of
friends.
us were just buddies, you know.
So then after we got married, he started painting. I mean, you
But it was way after
Way
that
after,
before
yeah.
I really.
really got into
Yeah.
it. Right.
I was, what, I had to be pushing. When I got in the first gallery, I was in my 40s,
Probably.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had a happy ride. We've been from what, Mexico, Bermuda, Ireland, Russia, Sweden,
Yeah.
Canada, Alaska.
Yeah. We went to, with one of my insurance companies, we went to, when we went to Russia, we went to St. Petersburg, and it's the most beautiful city. It's gorgeous. Peter built that to impress the West, and
And he
it
did.
was gorgeous, and he did, right.
We went to the Hermitage Museum, and it was so interesting that they had 2 docents in each room.
Wow.
And evidently we never realized what Russia was really like. When I say we, I mean America. Just being a Southerner, I'd look over at those 2 old docents about my age now, you know, and I'd say, "Hey, how are you?" And
They would not speak.
every time I spoke to them, that's what they would do. So we got back on the bus with our guide, who was a female, and I asked her, and she said, "You see, they all came up under the communist rule, and if they had spoken to you, or perhaps laughed and had a conversation, they would have had a visit from the authorities that afternoon." So
It's unreal.
we just, you know, we knew that Russia was different, but we didn't know how different. We've seen a lot, and a lot we've seen makes us appreciate America. And you have this thing, you need to paint what you know. Like I guess the first example of that was painting a clock that's on the wall across the room, and you can't see the numbers, but when you're painting it, you put 1, 2 in tiny little things, even though you can't see them. So you finally learned you don't have to do that, you know. I always equated it to, when you read a novel, very quickly you pretty well have an idea of what that main character looks like or is like or whatever. And that's what you need to stick with in a painting, is to give people just enough information for their brain to make the connection. I think they find it more interesting that way. Because if you want to paint every blade of grass and every leaf, take a photo. You got it, you know. But you can do so much with a painting with just changing the cloud color or do whatever to make it more attractive color-wise, or more harmonious. That's why you learn later on is a limited palette will do a lot towards harmonizing a painting. When I first started, I wanted every color I could find, you know. And the other great thing about painting is you never get there. You think, oh, I wished I could do this, and when you can do that, you find out there's another plane just above, you know, and then you want to do that. So it's a fascinating thing, and it's a fascinating group of people that you become associated with too. As I got represented by galleries to have larger paintings,
right.
But I love doing them. You know, it's like I used to think a 16 by 20 was a large painting. I think it's a small painting now, and 20 by 30 is a fairly small painting. 30 by 40s and up, I consider large now. I love 36, 48s, and like I say, 48 by 60s, but I don't need too many 48 by 60s because you're narrowing the market a pretty good bit there. But it's still fun to have some out there. But it's a more difficult painting because what you can do on a 12 by 16 with the brush stroke takes many brush strokes on a big paint, you know, to cover that same area. There's something about being spontaneous with a painting that gives it a life, and you can kind of only do up to so large. You know, I've always, you know, as a kid coming out, hunted, I fished, I hiked. I love being outside, love nature. Still get a special kick out of hearing an owl hoot at night, just stuff like that. So being outside and painting is fun. It's a challenge to produce a painting in an hour and a half, 2 hours before the light changes. So, you know, if you're there too long, the shadows are all moved on. If you're there too long, you're looking at a different scene. And you start chasing that light, you're going to mess up your painting. So you're forced to do it in an hour and a half or so, or come back the next day and do it during the same time slot and light. Oh, yes. I think painting outside is the best practice you can have